Very good morning to all of you. Can you all see my video? So I'm delighted to welcome all of you to this second session of our leadership series. And good morning, John. Welcome to the session. So welcome to all of you who joined us from various parts of the world, the UAE, Singapore, and India as well. I'm sure that you will enjoy this webinar. John and Mercury have been supporting sales teams across the world in a variety of industries and have a great deal of experience. And we heard back from a number of you, our customers, explaining that you were keen on having help because managing sales, particularly in the current scenario, is a very, very important aspect of you guys in the current COVID scenario. So hence this session, this webinar organized today. As you know, Mercury needs little introduction within the sales function, and most of you would probably be familiar with the wonderful work that Mercury does with leadership in sales. Without further ado, let me hand over to John to allow him to share with us his insights on this very timely topic. John, over to you.
Thanks, Leon. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Brilliant. And you can see the slide there.
Yes, that's lovely, John.
Okay, is it in slideshow mode? Probably not.
Not.
Good. Is that in slideshow mode now?
It is now. It is okay. Lovely.
Well, good morning and welcome everybody. This is very exciting to see so many people here. I'll be doing a lot of talking, but it's the whole point of this webinar is less about what I'm going to say and more about what questions you come up with and how we can make this interactive. So as far as the agenda is concerned, we are going to give you some insight about what we're hearing from our customers. This is both anecdotal, but also we've run a number of surveys as well. So we're getting some very interesting feedback from our clients. It's about understanding that new world order. What is actually happening now? How are companies reacting? How are customers buying? And then what you need to do about that, how we can concentrate effort in the areas that are most effective. Because one of the things that certainly I'm finding is it's very easy to be busy, but it's very difficult to be busy in the right areas. And then we're going to cover the recovery scenarios. The good news is that this is not going to last forever, and we need to be strong when we come out of this. And then we'll have time at the end for questions. So what I recommend is that you make a note of the questions as we go through, maybe on a piece of paper. Just write down your questions as we're going. And then we'll have a section at the end for question and answers. And what we'll also be doing after this webinar is we will be sending you white papers. We'll be keeping you updated on any changes that we're experiencing from our customers or any other recovery scenarios that we come up with. So that's the intention. So the kind of questions that we're addressing through this webinar are how to engage with customers now. What are the best ways of overcoming obstacles in this pandemic era? What are the tools available for me to move further? What are the industry best practices I can apply, given the challenging scenarios? And how can we be ready once the world returns to normal? So those are just some of the questions that we'll be covering throughout this presentation. So one of the problems in putting together a presentation like this is that we are in very much uncharted territory. Even in the most severe economic downturn, we've never experienced anything like this. There's no one we can turn to. There's no case studies or best practice or experts. So we have to come up with our own approach. And the danger with that is that we can actually spend a lot of time coming up with approaches that aren't going to be effective. So one of the things that I found, and I'm certainly hearing a lot, is that now we're working at home, we have more time. We're not traveling. We are probably working longer hours working at home. However, that can be quite inefficient. So we need to be a lot more focused in the way we're working. Everyone I'm talking to is saying they've never been as busy as they are at the moment. But part of that is down to the uncertainty and the number of decisions that we now have to be making that we're not used to. So what impact is this having on our customers? So this is what our customers are telling us. So what we're hearing is that there's either a significant increase or significant decrease in demand. So our hotel customers, for instance, basically they've got zero revenue, whereas our healthcare customers have never been as busy. This is having an impact on short-term and medium-term revenues. There's less time to make decisions, but there's more decisions to be made. And one of the problems with those decisions is nowadays it's actually quite difficult to tell what impact those decisions are having, because you're making multiple decisions. You don't know which decision has had a positive or negative impact. And you can also see that with the governments as well, that they're having a similar situation of having to make many decisions and struggling to figure out whether those decisions have had a positive or a negative impact. It's also the uncertainty. A lot of our customers are saying it would be fine if we knew this was all going to return to normal by June the 1st, but that uncertainty is causing massive problems for them. And there's also a psychological impact, and that's really difficult to assess. That's impacting our staff and also impacting our customers. So how do we respond to this? In my view, what we need to be very, very conscious of is when we are talking to our customers, we mustn't add to their problems. We've got to really be seen to be helping them. And in my opinion is that we must not be seen to be taking advantage of this situation. We really shouldn't be perceived as doing a hard sell. I think the way we need to be perceived is that we are subject matter experts and we're here to help in very challenging circumstances. In that case, we need to be very clear about how we add value, whether that's advice, whether it's assistance, whether it's just listening to them. In my opinion, it's extremely important that we are there as a subject matter expert and a trusted advisor to really help our customers. So we've also done some research on 30 customers, sales leaders, and the research, the outcomes of this research have been very interesting. So it's actually ended up being grouped into three, what we call horizons, three different horizons. So the one area that we're hearing is that customers are telling us, or sales leaders are telling us, they need to get a grip. And part of the problem is that they are unable to access decision makers. Either they don't have their mobile phones, they're not answering their emails, or obviously it's impossible to call when they're in the office, or they're just too busy. So getting hold of decision makers is very difficult. It's having a negative impact internally with their own sales teams. So a lot of salespeople are either exceedingly busy because demand has increased, or their revenues have dropped completely, and they're no longer going to reach target and get a bonus. So it's having, either way, it's having a negative impact on their own sales teams. There's lots of meetings, but those meetings were inefficient. And executives need to act quickly to get on top of the situation. So that's the feedback we're getting from sales leaders regarding getting a grip. The second horizon is that they need to adapt to weather the storm. So they need to be very short term in their thinking. So most describe these as being their main focus right now. One is to protect revenue streams. So the small amount of revenue they're getting, they need to make sure that that continues. They don't jeopardize the existing revenue, which is quite easy for that to happen, because you can easily get sidetracked or focused on building revenue rather than looking after your existing revenue streams. To protect customer relationships, to have a reason for talking to customers. And going back to what I was saying earlier about making sure that you're really adding value and you're not just annoying your customers by getting involved. And you also need to protect your key assets. Now, your key assets could be physical assets, but I think that for me, the key assets are your staff. You need to be really looking after your staff and making sure that they are effective. And the last horizon is repositioning for the future. So most sales leaders are telling us that they need to move early to a position to strengthen themselves for the future. Now, this is where you can refer back to previous crises. So economic downturns, when we look at those organizations that have come out stronger, are those that actually moved a lot earlier to position themselves for the future. It doesn't just require financial strength, but it also requires that these organizations and these sales leaders have paid attention to the other two horizons, which is getting a grip and weathering the storm. Now, there's a lot of information here. I'm not going to read it out. I will send you a link to this, this survey. So for each of these horizons, there are a number of different recommendations. So some of them are very obvious, but some are probably a lot more practical. So again, if you want to make a note on a piece of paper of any questions about any of these recommendations, just make a note and you can ask them later on in the presentation. So adapting to weather the storm, the recommendations are here. Okay, so if you just want to have a quick read through, I'm not going to read them out. So some of these might be controversial. So allocating top talent to priority customers, for instance, you might actually be worried that that might cause some issues with morale. If a high performer, a high performing salesperson is given additional responsibility. But the critical thing here is to be aware of that and manage it, but also it's to protect your top customers as well. And then the third horizon, repositioning for the future. Another number of recommendations, and this is absolutely critical that, that this is done. Now, for me, the repositioning the future is mainly strategic. It's quite easy to put some of these activities off. It's quite easy to focus on the short term, but I would recommend that all of you put aside a certain amount of time in your diary each week to do some of these activities. And I would almost recommend that that you actually take each one of these recommendations and have a 1 or 2 hour session per week on at least one of these recommendations to make sure that you are ready and positioned for the future. Good. So again, please do make a note of any questions you might have, or if you want any additional advice on each of these areas, please let me know. So these are the kind of things that you and your salespeople can be doing to understand this new world order. And again, the danger is that we focus on transactional activities rather than strategic activities during this period. So what your salespeople can be doing is really understanding what your major customer segments are facing as far as drivers are concerned. And the definition of a driver is an outside influence that is impacting that company that they have no control over. So it could be due to their competitors, it could be due to customer demand, it could be down to customer attitude and customer strategy. So these are all things that your customers have no influence over. And I suggest rather than doing it by individual customer, do it by customer segment. Then have a look at what their objectives are. Now, with the current pandemic, their objectives are going to be changing. Their objectives are going to be very different from what those objectives were 3 months ago. So that could be about reducing cost, maintaining revenue streams, focusing on core products and services. So really get to understand in a certain customer segment, what are their objectives? And then consider what are their challenges. And these challenges are different from drivers. These challenges are internal challenges that they can do something about. These challenges are internal factors that are stopping them achieving their objectives. So this could be the morale of their team. It might mean that actually they've lost some of their key workers. It might mean that they are struggling to communicate with their customers, or that they don't have enough revenue to be able to develop the right kind of products, or it might be about slow decision making. And those challenges are likely to be where you can help these customers. And that's where you can really add value. If you can help your customers overcome some of those challenges, that will give you a tremendous benefit for when this is all over, because those customers will remember how you helped them overcome their challenges. And the last thing to be aware of in a certain segment is what kind of measurements they now have in place. So they're probably now no longer looking at profit. Profit is probably a measurement that is irrelevant now. Revenue is probably more important. They probably don't measure their pipeline any longer because their pipeline is probably diminished so much that it's not relevant any longer. So maybe instead of measuring pipeline, they're measuring customer interactions. The chances also are that their measurements are becoming far more short-term than long-term. So they might be having weekly measurements rather than monthly or quarterly measurements. So again, do spend some time and get your salespeople to spend time analyzing major customer segments in terms of all those 4 elements. So another area that we can focus on or use our time wisely for is analyzing your major competitors. So try and understand what your competitors are offering that you don't right now. And again, that might be quite different from 3 months ago. So you can categorize those in 2 areas. There might be elements that your competitors are offering that you don't, that the customer really needs. So do you need to react to that? Do you need to adjust your offering, or can you counter those areas? There also might be elements that the competitors are offering that the customers just do not need. So actually they're wasting the customer's time. They might be irritating the customer, or the customers might be feeling as though they're having to pay for something that your competitors are offering, but they just do not need. So that is a very valuable piece of research that's worthwhile doing. However, you also need to be doing that for your own offer. So what are you offering that your competitors don't? And again, I would categorize those based on what your customers need and what they don't need. And certainly in this area, when you're communicating with your customers, really focus on what you offer that your competitors don't, that they need, and try and really identify what you're offering your customers do not need right now, and see if you can eliminate those. Okay, so the next part of the strategy is to concentrate your effort. What I think might be interesting is if you just spend a bit of time, just a couple of minutes, thinking about what factors might be influencing your results during this pandemic. And can you just write those in the chat box? Some of the things that you think, some of the factors you think might be influencing your own results in 2020. And it would be interesting if you put those into the chat box, and we can have a look at those later on, and maybe give you some advice on those. So just a minute or so in the chat box, just writing down some of the things that you think are going to impact your 2020 results. So Leon, I can't see the chat. Could you just let me know when we've got a certain number of chats responses to this in here, and we can move on? Leon or Anand, can you just let me know when the chat is completed?
Hi, John.
Hi, Leon. Yeah, can you just tell me whether
Hey.
whether we got some good ideas in the chat here?
Okay. Are you able to see the chat, John?
No, I
or do
can't
you
see
want
the
to go through
chat. Can you tell me is it a good idea to move on now based on the number of comments in the chat box?
We've got quite a few factors, including travel restrictions, inability to communicate with decision makers, value add products, profits, not being able to get through to the right person. Salary cuts, supply issues.
Okay.
Decreased income.
So most of those sound quite negative, don't
quite
they?
Quite a few inputs.
Yep. Good.
Yeah,
okay. So what we'll do is we'll take those at the end, and we'll categorize those, and we'll get everybody to understand what the how those are all categorized. So that's really interesting to see that. So what we have a look at is the frequency of some of those, but also what is really important for me is right. What's important is which ones are within your control and which are outside your control. Now, what we're finding when we're asking those questions is that 3 months ago, before this started, about 50% were outside your control and 50% were inside your control. When we ask that question now, we're finding about 80% of the factors are outside your control. So it's quite interesting when we analyze what you've put in the chat there, which ones are inside and which ones are outside your control. And it's quite obvious. We can worry, we can be concerned, we can certainly analyze those that are outside our control. But because those are increasing, we can easily waste an awful lot of time on those outside our control. So if we can really focus only on what we can influence, that is absolutely critical at the moment. Good. So this brings us nicely on to another tip. So one of the things that the factors that are impacting results link to very nicely is the question is about what factors influence results, not what are your results going to look like. So those factors are likely to be inputs to your results. So what we need to really understand is what is it that's going to drive our results over the next couple of months while we're still in this crisis period. We shouldn't be measuring our outputs. We shouldn't be measuring our revenue. We should be measuring what it is that generates that revenue. And that is broken into 3 different areas. The first input is the quantity of sales work we do. So how many customer meetings are we getting on the phone? How many messages are we sending? What kind of social media interactions are we having with our customers? So the quantity is very important. So we definitely should be measuring the quantity of sales work more so than the revenue at the moment. The next one is the direction. It's very easy to be busy. In fact, everybody I talk to is working 8, 9, 10 hours at the moment. So the quantity of work is not a problem. The direction is absolutely critical. And this was what came out of the survey, is focus on the customers who are going to be absolutely critical to you when this is over. So which customers are going to make you strong when this is over? Now that direction could be based on customer segments. It could be based on customer types, customer size. It could even be based on the decision makers, the type of decision makers you're talking to. It could also be based on the products and services you offer as well. So you might decide that there are some products and services that at the moment are nice to haves rather than critical. So focusing your effort in the products and services that are going to be most valuable at the moment are critical. And then the last element that's going to have an influence over your result is the quality of work. Now, one of the things that's happening in the current scenario is the way that we engage with customers is quite different. And the skills we need when we're selling remotely are very different from the skills we need when we're selling face-to-face. So it's definitely worthwhile analyzing the skills of your sales team. What skills are required with remote selling, and what development do you need to do to be able to help improve that quality? So just to summarize then, the business result is important, but we recommend measuring the inputs which the teams or individuals' activity. We should measure those based on quantity, direction, and quality of sales activity. So the quantity is how much, the direction is where, who, what are we talking about, and the quality is how well are those customer interactions, how well are they performing. Yeah, is there a question now? Okay, so what can your salespeople be doing to concentrate your effort? So we think this is a very effective approach to be able to ensure that your teams are focusing in the right area. Now, there are 3 steps to this strategy. The first is the intelligence gathering. Now, that is based on understanding the customer drivers, understanding their objectives, understanding their challenges and the measurements. So that is part of the intelligence. The other part of the intelligence is understanding what your competitors are doing. So what are they able to offer that you can't, that the customer needs and the customer doesn't need? And another part of the intelligence is to compare your offering with your competitors. So that is the intelligence. And obviously looking at trends, analyzing the kind of data, the surveys that we've described earlier on. The second part is then concentrate your effort. You cannot talk to every single customer and prospect. You cannot talk to every decision maker. You cannot talk to every customer segment. So be really clear about where you want to focus your effort. And then once you've done that, the dominance part comes once these restrictions and this crisis is over. You will have built a relationship, a customer base during this tough time that will enable you to outperform your competitors once this is all over. A good example that I like to give is that Honda motorbikes followed this strategy in the 1960s. So I don't know if any of you are aware of the UK motorbike industry, but in the 1960s, the UK manufacturers of motorbikes were exceptionally strong. They had Triumph, Norton, BSA. They absolutely dominated the UK motorbike market. Now, Honda wanted to penetrate the UK market. And what they could have done was offer a wide range of motorbikes to compete with the British manufacturers. But they decided not to do that. They spent a significant amount of time on the intelligence area. They analyzed the market, they analyzed the customers, they analyzed the competitors. And where they found the customer's driver was they needed a cheap form of transport for doing short journeys. They realized that customers wanted to save money, and they wanted to keep relatively dry, and they wanted a safe form of transport that was also cost effective. The challenge was that the British motorbikes, the small 50cc, 100cc motorbikes, were very unreliable. They were uncomfortable, and they weren't terribly well made. So Honda, instead of focusing on the whole market, brought out the Honda 50, 70, and 90. And they concentrated purely on that small sector, which was the commuter market. And they were very, very effective. Once they demonstrated the quality of their motorbikes and the reliability, they were then able to dominate the rest of the market. So that was an effective way that an organization has followed this strategy. So I really urge you to use this approach. So what's really important at the end is to make sure that you are stronger than your competitors. Analyze their strengths and weakness and reposition your organization. Be clear about what differentiates you. And one of the advantages at the moment is many customers are actually slightly more open-minded to new ideas, because they need to be innovative themselves. So if a supplier comes to them with a new idea, the chances are they're going to be far more open to innovation than they would have been 3 months ago. Strengthen your brand. Use this as an opportunity to strengthen your brand and your own personal brand as well. So use social media to build your own brand. Improve your websites. Make sure you're quite clear about how you're adding value to your customers. Be very clear about how you're listening to customers as well. And improve things like your LinkedIn profile. It's very important. Also, use this as an opportunity to build your network. This is an opportunity to talk to people that you've not talked to before, or use your existing network to help you get to talk to people that you've not spoken to before. References are absolutely critical. References and networking is absolutely critical at the moment. And then the last strategy for how to come out of this stronger is to broaden your customer base. So contact customers that you wouldn't normally talk to. Have a good reason to contact them. In my opinion, you shouldn't be trying to sell to them. You should be showing how you can help. And many of you have probably heard of the Pareto rule, that 80% of your business comes from 20% of your customers. So try and predict that once this is all over, what is that 80-20 going to look like? Where is 80% of your revenue going to come from? And focus on those 20% of customers that's going to generate that revenue once the lockdown is finished. So you have a choice. And I've seen very clearly two different approaches. One is you can be a spectator. You can watch all this happen. You can be interested. You can say, yeah, that's really good. And you can have an opinion. Or you could be a player. Now, it's quite clear which one you need to be, but you need to make that conscious decision, because it's quite easy to spend all your time watching what's happening rather than actually doing. So Mercury can help. We can help with development in sales leadership, in customer service, and with middle and senior management. We can help with virtual classroom training. We can help with online learning modules, virtual sales coaching. We can help you with research and analysis, competence assessments, business simulations, and sales tools. Those are just some of the ways that we can help. We're just about to launch, we just designed and we're just about to launch a remote selling program. It's 1.5 hours. And this is going to be ready to be rolled out on Monday, the 27th of April. So just to describe what this looks like, it's divided into a number of modules. The first module is really understanding what the difference is between face-to-face and virtual, and what are the opportunities that selling remotely can bring, but also what are some of the challenges and how you can overcome those challenges. The other is about research. It's about collecting information on the internet. It's very easy when you're doing research, especially when you're working from home, to get sidetracked, to start spending a lot of time researching elements that actually aren't going to help. Module 3 is about preparing your virtual meeting. This 4S method is a well-proven structure that works very well in virtual meetings. So it focuses on the customer situation. It allows you to select the relevant objectives for the meeting. It gives you a number of different scenarios, or makes you think about a number of different scenarios for the meeting. And it also gives you, or makes you prepare for the supporting tools. Module 4 is about having organizing a checklist that ensures a logical sequence that you can achieve your objectives and keep control of the meeting. Module 5 is designing an effective slideshow for virtual presentations, being quite clear about how long it's going to take, about ensuring that it's to the point and comes across as being highly tailored to the customer situation. Module 6, extremely important in remote meetings. Be very, very active in your listening and listen out for what's said and what's not said. Module 7 is about effective virtual communication, keeping customers engaged and overcoming the disadvantages of being remote. And finally, it's about using storytelling to engage your audience. So we're not talking about fairy tales here, but we're talking about best practice. We're talking about success stories. We're talking about certain customer scenarios. And this makes sure that these meetings are conversational, and it demonstrates that you're a subject matter expert. And I like the term that you're really adding value here by floating ideas by the customer. So you're not telling them what to do, but you are getting them to think themselves about what they could do, and you're giving them ideas. So what's critical is that as a result of this webinar, that you actually stop, you think, and you plan. And I would recommend that sometime today you put aside maybe half an hour or so just to stop, think, and plan about what we've covered in this webinar, and think about what you're going to do differently, what actions you're going to put into place, and how you're going to change as a result of some of the tips and techniques that we've included in the webinar. Right, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and we're going to open it up to a question and answer session.
Lovely. John, thank you so much for those insights. I'm sure everybody would have enjoyed this. We have received a few questions, John. If you don't mind, I'll go through a few of those and allow you to answer it for all. So,
Yep, absolutely.
John, one of the first questions today, one of the roles that few would want to be in would be that of a sales leader. And the one thing that is keeping us sales leaders awake at night is how do we maintain and grow the top line or improve our bottom line during these uncertain times. So, John, the questioner is asking for tips and anything that you could suggest to help.
Okay, exceptionally good question, which I'm not surprised by looking at the audience. So I think the first thing to do is to keep your sales team upbeat. So maintain that that motivation. As I said in the presentation, that they're going to they're probably not going to reach target. They're probably not going to get a bonus. Salespeople thrive on results, and there's a big chance their results are going to be down now. So they'll be under tremendous pressure that they're putting on themselves. So really keep them upbeat, keep them focused on the right prospects, and help support them with that. So they could quite easily get despondent by targeting the wrong prospects or the wrong customers. And one of the things I think is really critical is share success. Even if it's only a small success, it's really important that they share that with everybody. And they also need to be given the training and the sales tools to be able to do their job effectively. And some of those will be different from what it was like before this crisis happened.
True. Thank you so much for that, John. John, if you want to
do you think that answers the question?
Yeah,
does that answer
lovely.
the question well enough?
Yes, thank you so much for those insights. I think it's very important, as you rightly said, that people take a step back, digest what we've shared with them, and then look to implement the ideas that, in their belief, would make the most impact on what they're doing. That's very, very valuable advice, John.
Yep.
If I could move on to the next question.
Sure.
One of our participants asked, how do I ensure that my teams utilize a buyer-driven sales process?
Okay, a buyer-driven sales process. Okay, so what I would do is go back to the point I was making about the research. So you need to really any time, but particularly now, you need to be very customer focused. So you really need to understand, you need to be talking to the customer from their point of view, not from your point of view. And you mustn't come across as selling. So you really need to understand their drivers, their objectives, their challenges and their measurements. So really understand the customer segment and make it really clear that you understand that customer when you're talking to them. And I think that what's also important is understand the buying process. The buying processes have probably changed. It's probably easier now to get authority for small purchases. However, big purchases are probably are very difficult to get authorized within the organization. So what is the buying process? And what is the buying criteria now? Price might not be quite so important. It might be more about what does that do for our organization, or what does that do for me personally? So really understanding the customer scenario is absolutely critical.
True. Excellent. Thank you so much, John, for that.
Does that answer the question again?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I'm sure the simple logic, old assumptions may no longer apply. So it's important that we retest the assumptions we have, ask questions, and be open to the answers being different this time round. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Fair enough. If I'll proceed to the next question, John, is there any way I can bring predictability to the forecasting process?
Yeah. Okay. So the trouble is forecasting is challenging at any time. But particularly now, the people, all the pipeline is completely changed. However, I'd say that the forecasting fundamentals are still the same. It's still about understanding the pipeline. it's understanding how decisions are getting made. It's understanding how commitments are being made. So I think what's really important with forecasting is try and be as realistic as possible. It's very easy to either be too pessimistic now or overly optimistic. So again, really listen to what the customer's telling you and find out, do they have a budget for this? When's it likely to happen? How's the decision-making process going to work? And only put elements into your forecast that you can see a clear progression. If it's just an idea a customer has got for buying from you, but they've got no clear process, they've got no clear budget, there's no clear authority, don't include that in your forecast.
Valuable advice. Thank you so much for that, John. So you're absolutely right. The fundamentals stay the same, but the reality is different. So we're going to have to pay far more attention to the buying cues, listen far more carefully, ask far more questions.
Yep.
Lovely.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that. Another question from one of our participants, John, is how do I set realistic, measurable goals and milestones in certain times like these?
Yeah. Okay. So again, going back to what I was saying about what we're hearing from customers is that a lot of those goals and milestones are far more short term now. So I think you need to adjust as well, and maybe report weekly, maybe even daily in some cases. But I don't know if everyone remembers what I was saying about kind of measurements we need to have in place is try and measure the inputs rather than the outputs. So the inputs are going to determine what your results are going to look like in the future. So if you just focus on the results, that's based on the sales activity you did in the past, which is not terribly helpful. And you can't, because we need to make decisions more quickly, it's going to be very difficult if we're basing that on the results that are determined by activities that we might have done 2 or 3 weeks ago, or maybe even longer. So really focus on the inputs rather than the outputs. And those inputs are, in my opinion, the sales activity, the quantity, direction, and quality of sales activity, which actually is quite difficult to measure. So that is a challenge in itself, but I really urge everybody on this call to measure the quantity, direction, and quality of sales activity more so than the actual results. And obviously the pipeline is very important to measure as well.
Well put. Thank you so much for that, John. That's valuable advice. Another participant asks, what are sales leaders doing creatively in times like these to grow their business? So any examples, any other insights you have?
Yeah. Okay. So I think one of the things that we're finding sales leaders are doing is it's giving them an opportunity to reinvent the way their sales teams sell. The sales teams are looking for a direction from their managers, and what's really dangerous, or what's a real danger at the moment, is that their managers are unclear about what they're doing and what direction they're giving. I think it's far better to give a clear direction. It might be wrong, but it's far better to give some sort of direction. And I'll come back to another point I've got on this in a minute if I remember. So use this to reinvent the way you sell. Use this to develop the skills of your sales team. Again, use the quantity, direction, and quality of sales activity to really understand how the strengths and weaknesses of each of your salespeople. Focus on how you can differentiate your offering from your competitors. So just coming back to this decision making, you're going to be making, as a sales leader, you're going to be making decisions. You're going to be making them quickly. You're often going to be making them without any clear idea about what impact it's going to have. Now, I've got a friend who's a currency trader, and I once asked him, what is it that makes a difference, you know, a good currency trader and a poor currency trader? And actually, I think the kind of decisions a currency trader is making is quite similar to what a sales manager might be making in the current scenario. Is they're having to make very quick decisions that can have a massive impact. So a small change can have a massive result. And what he told me, the big difference was that if you make the wrong decision, make sure that you correct it quickly. Don't keep trying to make that wrong decision work, except that I'm really sorry, guys, we probably shouldn't be doing this. It's not working. Let's stop. I've got another idea though. So I think that's another way that a sales leader can really be creative and innovative at these times.
That's fantastic insight, John. Thank you so much for that. One last question before we close, John. One of our participants asked, what can we do to improve the customer experience today?
Yeah. Okay. So again, I touched on this to a certain extent in the presentation. What's really critical, as far as I'm concerned, is be absolutely clear about how you're adding value. If you hadn't spoken to that customer, what would that customer have lost? What wouldn't they have got because they didn't speak to you? So be really clear about how I can help them. Now that might be storytelling. It might be about giving them advice. It might be about what they're hearing in the market, but be absolutely clear about how you're adding value every interaction you have. And I do think that now is not the time to be seen as going for a hard sell. So in my opinion, try not to be there as someone that's going for a hard sell, but be that trusted advisor, be that subject matter expert, and be someone that's maintaining a dialogue, that you are keeping the customer engaged. And that dialogue really requires listening to them very well. So really demonstrate you're listening to the customer. Summarize well, repeat what they've said, empathize, and then act.
Superb, John. Thank you so much for those insights. That is very helpful. Empathy, feedback, and as you rightly said, not going for the hard sell. This is the time when everybody needs help, and I think the old saying, "A friend in need is a friend indeed." So this is our chance as salespeople to prove to be friends to customers, rather than just salespeople. And I think they'll remember that, wouldn't they?
Yep. Okay. I'm just having a look through the chat. So what would be really nice, I think, is if we can, we can, obviously we're out of time now, if we can extract some of the other comments and questions from the chat, and we'll send some sort of follow-up communication.
Lovely. I think that's a brilliant idea, John. We'll extract the questions from the chat, and then maybe we'll try and sort those out into a few categories. And with your help, we'll put some responses together, and then when we share the webinar recording with everybody, what we'll do is we'll include the question answer bank as well. You're right. I think that will be very helpful. Yeah. So
I'm going to use my own advice and suggest that we create a dialogue with all of you. That you've spent 1 hour of your time listening to this webinar. But I think what's important now that now becomes a dialogue rather than just a one-off interaction.
Certainly, John. We will also be sharing contact details with everybody who's participated. So yes, please feel free, for all of you on this webinar, please feel free to reach out to us. Both Daksada and Mercury will look to get back to you, look to help and support you in these times. John, I must say this has been very, very informative. It is very, very appropriate in terms of where we are. And given that we're all considering the same questions, I think the answers, the thoughts, the tips, the suggestions you've made today, I'm sure will go a long way to all of us coping and dealing with the current situation. So thank you so much for that. A big thank you to you and Mercury for taking this time to address our clients, answer the questions. A big thank you to all of our participants as well. We're sure you have busy schedules, but we thank you for joining us. We will be sharing with you the recording of this webinar. So you will receive that in an email, a link to download that for you.
Good.
And
Well,
need to remind you of a couple of things. Yes, John?
No, I just wanted to wish everyone a good week and to keep safe and well, and I hope their families are also keeping safe and well.
True. Thank you, John. So just a couple of reminders. One is John has already shared with you details of some of the online opportunities for further learning that Mercury International is putting together. We will share details of that with you for any one of you who is interested in signing up. Similarly, we are also organizing further sessions. We are working closely with Mercury. We are in a position to therefore offer you far more bespoke, far more customized solutions that would help you as sales leaders, you and your sales teams, to cope with and manage your sales efforts now as well as for time to come. So those options are available. Please feel free to reach out to us. We will be able to work with Mercury and bring you customized solutions. We'd also like to remind you that we have our third and final webinar within our overall leadership series, which we will be bringing to you next week, Monday, the 27th of April. The subject of that webinar is Leading with Authenticity in Challenging Times, and that is focused again on people in leadership roles. So we do look forward to you signing up for that webinar as well. On behalf of Mercury and Daksada, let me thank you once again for taking the time to join us. We absolutely hope that you've benefited from the inputs and insights. And we do hope that you, your family, and your colleagues are safe and continue to be so. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. John, once again, thank you so much to you and Mercury for the insights. They've been very, very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Good day.